Hello and good afternoon. Welcome back to Music 110 Introduction to Audio Technology. I am Dr. Clint, and today we are going to be talking about composition rather than technical issues. So, hopefully, this will be a rather brief lecture. Like I just said, I will not really be talking about technical issues today like I usually do. I will be using a lot of these techniques that we've gone over so far in the class to demonstrate some of the things that I'm going to be doing. But really, I'm going to be talking about composition and talking in a way to hopefully give you guys some ideas on how to develop your sound collage beyond your first sketch. So all of you have come up with some sketches already, and maybe you're at a point where you have something that you like, one idea that you like, and you're kind of maybe trying to figure out how to develop that one idea into something more. So what you're dealing with is the compositional problem of creating structure. Music is all structured in time. One way to think of it is music is a painting painted on the canvas of time. And time is always moving forward. So when we create musical pieces, when we create whole songs or whole musical pieces, what we're doing is we are structuring time. So as a painter will structure a canvas, a painting into images and relationships on a plane, we are creating images and relationships in time. So what that really comes down to is what we call musical structure, which is how different sections, different phrases, and different ideas relate to each other in sequence in time. So same thing, when you hear a song and you can tell that it goes verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, then then what you're talking about is musical structure. And you know that the chorus hits because it's the catchy thing that repeats, and you know that the bridge hits because it's something different than the verse and the chorus. Same thing is happening when you listen to classical music or jazz or whatever. It's separated into different sections, and the reason that you know that it's a different section is because something in the music has changed from what it was before. Now, when you have a sketch now, say that you have a sketch that is one single musical idea, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I develop this one idea into something more of a musical structure? In other words, how is this one musical idea that I've already developed within Studio One or the DAW of my choice? How is this a section or a part of a larger piece of music? So I'm going to be talking just about a couple of processes to go through as a composer to develop larger structures out of just one single idea. There are many ways to go about doing this. I'm just going to be talking about a couple today that I think will be useful to you and this particular assignment, this particular project. We will be continuing to talk about different approaches to composing music as we go throughout the semester. Today, we are going to be talking about two. One is going to be removing layers, and the other process or technique, compositional technique, is going to be juxtapositioning material. So, removing layers and juxtapositions. Let's start with removing layers. Now, it might seem strange that I would say to create a new section, remove layers. But one thing that, and this is particularly true working within a digital audio workstation or any sort of computer music environment, is that it's so easy to build up a whole bunch of layers on top of one another to create a sound world that often when we are sketching out our ideas at first, we end up with lots of layers because we're just trying different things. And then we might end up with something that is all a whole bunch of layers. I'll be using this same example that I've been using the whole time, which really is only 3 layers. I know that some of you are working with music that has up to 8 layers or more. So even just with these 3 layers, I think you'll see how once I start removing some and talking about how I can, by listening and listening and removing layers, I can start to make some compositional decisions to make some different sort of sections and make the music evolve over time. So what I'm saying is, through the process of sketching out, you are building up layers. Then you're going to say, okay, what do I do with this sketch? How can I play with it as a composer and turn it into a more developed and evolving idea? And one way to do that is to remove layers, much like a DJ would mix in different layers, take out the drums, take out the vocal, make the vocal solo. All of these types of decisions articulate formal structural changes. So, in order for me to demonstrate this, I'm going to remind you of what this session sounds like. Again, this is me just sort of remixing or resampling. I took samples from that jazz track, and I'm creating something new out of just that one jazz song. And this is the idea, the sketch that I came up with. Okay, so, and it loops like that. So that's my idea. Now, let's say I have this idea and I'm thinking, okay, how do I expand on this? How do I turn this into something more than just this one riff? So I'm going to now that we've listened to all of that together, I'm going to go through and I'm just going to like solo these different tracks and start to think about like, okay, so how could I build up towards this larger texture? Or how could I, through a musical process, reduce this texture? So we just listened to the whole texture. Now I'm just going to start soloing different tracks and start to think about my options. Okay, so I've just kind of gone through and I'm just listening to these layers by themselves, thinking about how they combine and what they sound like totally by themselves. Now, let's say I'm thinking about, okay, what are some ways that I could build up to hearing all of them together? Like start with just one or two and then build up. Now, as I was listening, I was kind of thinking, I really I don't think that this fourth track down here, this sort of cymbal swell, really stands up on its own. So I really like how it mixes with the rhythm track. Maybe I'll try the rhythm track totally by itself and then bring in the cymbal swell, see what I think. So And I'm thinking, doesn't really make as much sense. I kind of like the cymbal swell coming in, and then immediately we get the rhythm. But I kind of like leaving the brass out at first. First off, because I think the brass is kind of annoying, but also because I like kind of building. I like how this rhythm kind of builds up to something coming in, some sort of melody coming in later. So, in other words, if I mute the brass track and then we go like this. Okay, so let's say we have one time without the brass altogether. And so how am I going to do that? Well, I need to now, instead of looping, I'm going to have to copy and paste this all of this material over so that it plays twice. Okay, so I'm going to select it. I'm going to press copy, and just so you know, I'm in the snap to grid mode, and I paste it. Oh, that is not what I expected to happen. Okay, so the way that I ended up pasting it was it created these new tracks for me down below. Now, that's okay, but if I'm going to be creating doing a lot of copying and pasting this material, plus here's the problem. I have all that delay and filtering on the rhythm track above, and now I've moved that same rhythm the samples of the rhythm track down to the cymbal solo track, which has different effects. So this is not going to work. So I'm going to Command Z or undo. The reason that it copied and pasted in that particular way, is I had this fourth track selected. And so that the top track that was copied will start there. So I'm going to make sure that all those tracks are highlighted, and then I'm going to paste. All right. So my tracks ended up they ended up in the right tracks, but this is not going to sound like a loop, right? Because I have this extra cymbal swell space at the beginning so that you can hear the cymbal come in like so. But I don't need that the second time around, right? I want this to just keep going as if it's a band. So I'm just going to splice there and erase. And since I'm in snap to grid mode, I can just grab all of this stuff, and when I drag it over, everything will snap to where I want it to be. If I was not working in snap to grid mode, if I was not snapping to grid, but I wanted what was happening before to nudge right up to the end of the last loop, then I would then I would have to go into event, select the things that you want to remove the gaps between, and click remove gaps. Okay. So now I have this. Now I've created I've reproduced the loop, right? So. And when I get to the end, it returns. You will notice that when I snipped off the fade in to my cymbal swell, what happened was I have this hard splice here, and so what I really want is a fade, right? So if I were to, nope, that's not what I want to do. So I've got a couple of options here. The easiest thing would be to just create 2 tracks for my cymbal swells. I should be able. Yeah, great. So now all I had to do. So even though I clipped off the very opening of this cymbal fade, I can still the Studio One still remembers what this audio file is. So I can sort of like drag the edge of this audio file open again, or to the right again, and now I'm going to have these sort of 2 alternating tracks of cymbal swells. That way I have a nice smooth crossfade between them. If you didn't have material like this, again, you could create the fades like so, ensuring that you'd have smooth fades. So that would be the way to go about if you need to crossfade between sounds in order to create a more smooth loop. Okay, so now that I've done this, I can totally remove the brass in this first loop here, and that way we can hear the percussion or the rhythm tracks totally by themselves. Okay, so I'm just going to remove them. And the other thing let's just play this. Okay, well, you'll notice that suddenly that cymbal track was super loud. The second cymbal track came in. I kind of liked how it emphasized the brass entering. Of course, if we want the cymbal track to have this smooth transition between, now that I've done this, I realize I've got to go over to my console and check. So here, the volume of the cymbal track is at -12, and the new cymbal swell is at 0. So if I bring this down to -12.1, now we should have a smooth transition. Okay, so now I've created. Now what I'm able to do now that I've copied and pasted over is I'm able to remove layers and sort of play around here with play around with the layering. Now let's just say I've been toying around with like going back and forth between this texture with the brass and without it. And let's say I'm kind of interested in, maybe the rhythm is going on for a while, and then I have a fade in of a really long brass note, and then we suddenly get to the peak of that brass note, and then we just get the brass all by itself for, say, for one time through the phrase. So it'll go through one time through the phrase, bam, 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 and then everyone comes back in. So if I'm going to do that, I'm going to want to again copy and paste all of this stuff. Let's see, right? Copy and paste all of this stuff, and follow my same process as before, where I'm going to probably have to. So now you can see that now that I've got 2 cymbal tracks, I did not mean to do that. I've got 2 cymbal tracks. This allows me to just alternate between the 2 tracks that are right on top of each other. And now I can snap. So I'm snapping to grid, which will allow me to, Okay. So like I said, what I'm going to be doing is let's see, which one do I want to use? So I'm going to solo this just to remind myself of. Okay, so I'm going to grab this brass hit. I'm going to copy it. And I am going to put this, I'll explain this and what I'm doing in a second. I'm going to put this here, say, and as I said before, what I'm going to do is like have a long brass fade in that will peak at this first brass hit, and at that moment I will cut out all of the rhythm. So what I'm going to do is, let's see, right here, I'm going to cut out all this stuff for the entire phrase. And I'll do this just for the sake of. So I'm going to cut out all of this stuff before we return to Right, this is good. So I'm taking out all of this stuff. Now, I could automate the volume change here, but the thing is, by erasing all of this audio, it just makes it so much easier to navigate and I don't have to worry about changing back and forth the volume. So really, so here I'm removing all of this. I'm removing all of these drum hits, and then we'll have brass by itself, and it'll go on for a while, and then everyone will return together. Like I said, I want to have this long brass fade in, so what I'm going to do is select here, and I'm going to use our audio effects to time stretch this. So I want it to be the same basic. I want it to be the same pitch, but I want it to be slowed down a lot. So let's slow it down to 0.2. See how long that makes it. Okay, let's slow it down more to 0.05. Okay, that makes it pretty long. All right, and okay. So what I'm going to do is I've made this long brass hit, and you can see the envelope has an attack and then a fade. So if I go, I just like control clicked or right clicked on the audio, and it gives me some audio options. I can reverse the audio. Okay, so I'm going to click here, and now this has reversed the audio. Obviously, I can now move this closer to this hit, and I can go in. I can stop snapping to grid. I can go in real close and I can go in real close and get rid of this silence at the beginning. So there's a lot more silence at the beginning, right? Because I've time stretched it. So that's increased the tiny little silence at the beginning and expanded it. And then if I move this nudge it right up to the beginning here of this hit, what this will end up giving me is it'll give me this sort of like fade in on a long brass note that will sound something like, well, it'll sound like this. I'll play it. So this is this brass thing soloed. cool. I like that. Let's see how this sounds with all of this combined. So again, I've taken out the brass layer and just had the rhythm layer play. Then I'm going to have the brass fade in, take out the rhythm layers, and just have the brass play. And then after one time through the phrase, everyone will come in together. So the point is here that layers don't have to build up in a linear way. It could be you just have one, then you have the other layer, then you have both of them combined. So let's see how this all sounds now that I have. So we're gonna hear this 3 times through the phrase. The first time it'll be just with the rhythm. The second time it'll be just with the brass, and the third time it'll be with everyone together. Okay, so you get the point. I mean, if I were to continue with this idea, I would certainly mess around with fades on this reversed brass note because it just comes in too strong. I would probably do something like this with the fade, so that now, just so you can hear that. Again, I would even kind of push this more in that direction to really have it sort of like suddenly jump, like slow fade and then suddenly jump up. So I would definitely be messing around with the shape of the fade. Another thing I would do is I would try to figure out ways to have this have the return of the rhythm be sharper, more intense. The point being here, as soon as I start taking out layers and putting them back in, I can take one idea and repeat it, but you hear it in different ways because I'm removing layers and making different combinations of the whole texture to create structural changes. So instead of just hearing this over and over again, we're able to we hear it in different ways, and we start to hear different relationships between the layers themselves. Okay, so this is one way that you could approach turning a single idea into more of a musical structure, removing layers and combining them in different ways, and actually playing that out in time. So, like we did here, rhythm by itself, brass by itself, everyone together, and you could see how this could play out in all sorts of different ways depending on the materials you're using. Okay, let's also talk about juxtaposition. So let's say I have this idea, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to just juxtapose this with something that is not musical. So I've got all this jazz stuff all this stuff from this jazz track that I've messed with and changed. What if I bring in a sound that is not a musical sound? And so I happen to really think that flamingos make cool sounds, so I went to Freesound and I downloaded a flamingo sample. So what I'm going to do is bring in a new sound and juxtapose it with the material that I already have. Okay, so here I am. I have downloaded this Flamingo Calls Ensemble.wave file from Freesound. It went to my downloads folder. Now, I could drag this directly into Studio One from my downloads folder, but I'm a responsible technological musician, and I know that it's important to keep my audio keep my files and folders well organized so that no matter what, I know where to find my audio and it's not saved all over the place in random places on my hard drive. So I know where this particular Studio One session is. So when I created it way back in 2019, it put it into my documents folder on my computer, and it created all these other folders. I created this audio folder in here so that I could put all of the audio that I'm using in this project into one place. So I'm just going to move this over there so that it's in the folder where the Studio One session is. In other words, I know exactly where that audio is, that it belongs there. You'll notice that the jazz song is not in here, and that is because I am an irresponsible computer musician. Okay, so I'm just going to drag and drop this flamingo sample into my Studio One session. Now, there are a couple of ways that now I can play with the juxtapositions of the flamingos and the jazz. So what ways can they juxtapose? Well, to start off, what if the flamingos were first? So it would sound something like this. That's okay. Maybe I like how this cymbal swell is like the opener, and maybe I wanted to play around with juxtaposing this music with the flamingos and at some other point in the song. So let's set. How about this? What if this brass build up leads up to one brass hit, then we just hear the flamingos for a bit, and then we hear the rest of the brass, something like that. So let's just say I don't want to commit to erasing all of this brass yet, so I'm just going to mute it at the right time. So I will press play, and then I'm going to mute the brass right when the flamingos start, and then I will bring the brass back in, and we'll see how that sounds. Okay. What if the flamingos came in at the very end of this? So let's skip ahead. Interesting. So now that we've actually heard the brass several times, the maybe annoying brass line several times, now that the flamingos come after that, I can really hear both like a timbre or a tone color connection between the brass and the flamingos, but almost like a rhythmic one too. So now, because of the juxtaposition, I can say I'm hearing the flamingos in a new way. So we could say, so maybe we have a moment of solo flamingo action, then maybe the brass returns, or the rhythm returns. So I'm going to copy and paste this over to here, let's say, just out of curiosity, so we can hear it coming. Okay, so I think you can kind of see the point. Like, as soon as I created this juxtaposition, that doesn't mean that I necessarily have to go in this totally new direction. Bringing in this flamingo layer and juxtaposing it, it was almost like expanding on the brass idea. Now, where I take it from here, that's up to me. So I can bring this rhythm back in. Maybe I can play around more with the filter and the delay, like I was doing the other day, and keep the flamingos in there. Maybe I can keep the flamingos in there and give them a similar delay so that it becomes like a flamingo delay, flamingo percussion delay party, and then wait to bring the brass back later. I could create a dialogue between the brass and the flamingos. Like if I wanted to go back and forth really quickly between them, I mean, all I really would have to do is, just out of curiosity, I could move this back over here and just listen to kind of line it up so that it almost is like call and response between the brass and the flamingos, and see if this gives me some ideas. So I have a lot of options here, and just through the process of juxtaposition, this is going to allow me some avenues that I could take for transitions. Okay, so I've gone through two techniques. Is you take a sketch where you already have some layers on top of each other, and you think about taking layers out, and how the process of removing those layers could actually be a compositional process, a musical structure, where you get one layer, then another layer, then the combination of the two layers. And then we looked at, okay, I have this type of material, which is all these samples from a jazz song. I'm going to bring in stuff that isn't music, that's flamingos, and then I'm going to juxtapose it with the jazz. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh wow, these flamingos and this brass match really well and in interesting ways. And so this allows, this kind of says, okay, now I can create new juxtapositions. So chiseling away and juxtapositions, these are ways that you can develop new materials and come up with new sections and create more complex forms than just one main idea. If I were you, I'd really, kind of shoot for 2 ideas, maybe 3. In most music, that's about it. Like, it's 2 ideas. If you listen to a Beethoven symphony, it's usually 2 or 3 ideas, and then he just combines those 2 ideas in different ways, and has different ways to develop them with each other. It's like a dance. So think about how you have 2 ideas that are dancing with one another, and then there are all sorts of ways that you could create a musical narrative where that dance evolves. Okay, so have fun finalizing your sound collages. The main thing to focus on is just focus on making sure that you do all of those techniques that I outline in the assignment, and make sure that in your write-up you discuss where you did those techniques and how you did them. When we meet next, we will be listening to everyone's sound final mixdowns, so upload those to Blackboard and be ready to talk about them with everyone else. And we'll have a sort of like a songwriter or composer, essentially a composer party, where we listen to everyone's work and discuss it and talk about ideas, and then we'll get ready for the next creative project. All right, so I'll see you next time. I'm really looking forward to listening to everyone's sound collages, and I hope that this helped you get some ideas on how to turn a sketch into a final short piece of music. See you next time.